Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mangus, and a little while back I made a video titled What I Want from a Path of Radiance remake, and a lot of you guys seem to like that video and you wanted me to follow it up with another one called What I Want from a Genealogy Remake, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. So Fire Emblem 4 is probably one of the most beloved games in the series. People really like this game. They love its world building, its amazing story, all the emotional gut punches this game throws your way, and of course it has some of the most beloved characters to date. So people really love Genealogy, but I would say that people don't really like playing Genealogy. The game is starting to show its age, it is the fourth game in the series, and many of the mechanics of the game don't really hold that well up by today's standards. The maps are extremely large, the game is just very slow to play, and it has a lot of weird mechanics that people might not enjoy, so the game itself would really benefit from a remake. Now, I've said this before, I think that Path of Radiance is going to be the next remake. And I would also be really hyped if they remade Binding Blade, as it is my favorite game in the series. But out of all the games in the series, I think that Fire Emblem 4 would be the best remake. I think it would be the game that would benefit the most from a remake, because if you take Fire Emblem 4's story and characters, which are already incredibly popular, and you apply modern game design to make it more enjoyable to play, I think you're gonna have a smash hit. I mean, they remade Echoes, and Echoes did fairly well, and that was a remake of Gaiden, a game that almost no one played. Imagine what they could do with Fire Emblem 4. That would be honestly just spectacular to imagine. So in this game, I'm going to be talking about what I would want from a Genealogy remake. Let's begin. Now, with the previous video, I started off by talking about how I would want it to look, what engine I would want to run it on, and I think this is a good opener for this one as well. Now, with Fire Emblem 4, I think it is absolutely crucial that you retain the epic battle animations. I think the Jugdraw games, Fire Emblem 4 and Fire Emblem 5, have some of the coolest battle animations in the game's history. Like, I think they're absolutely timeless. The way Sigurd jumps through the air on his horse before he attacks his opponents is absolutely spectacular. I love how some characters charge at their opponents. I love how the camera goes back and forth and how the characters just look like they're really fighting. I mean, they haven't really been able to do battle animations like that ever since those two games, and I don't really understand why. It should be doable. And the only way to really retain those epic battles, I think, is to take Fire Emblem 4, or its remake, back to like a 2D sprite-based graphic style, similar to Octopath Traveler or Project Triangle Strategy. I think that is really the only way you can do it. I want the animations to look very similar. I want the game to look very similar. I just want it to look cool and epic and remastered. So really, I wouldn't really want to change too much about the engine. I would just want it to look cooler, pretty much. So the next thing I want to talk about is the game's plot. And I will say that to this day, I think Fire Emblem 4 has hands down the best storytelling in the entire series. I think no other game even comes close. Fire Emblem 4 is an epic story that spans 2 generations, and it is absolutely marvelous. But there are 2 problems with the storytelling that needs to be addressed in the remake. The first one is that there's a lot of stuff in that game that just happens off screen, and other characters just tell you about it. And that's not good storytelling. Now this is of course because the original Fire Emblem 4 didn't really have cinematics. I mean, you get a small intro event when you start up the game, and then you kind of just get tossed into the world, and you see everything pretty much through Sigurd's eyes in the first generation and through Selif's eyes in the second generation. You don't really get to see the point of view of other characters, and I think that would be very helpful in a remake. First of all, with cinematics, you can tell a lot of epic stories that the player wouldn't otherwise be able to experience. And just with bonus scenes, like, I'd love to see more from Arvis's perspective. I'd like to see more of what happens between him and Daedra. Would be really cool to see a cinematic of him finding Daedra in the gardens, after Manfroy put her there. And of course, the epicness that happens after the Battle of Valhalla. I want to see that in a cinematic. That would absolutely be insane. So there's a lot of loose ends and a lot of things that happens off screen that I think a remake would need to tie up. The second problem is, of course, the darkness. When I say the darkness, I mean particularly the child hunts and the incests. Now, you can't really do Fire Emblem 4 without these 2 elements. They're integral parts of the story, but a remake would probably want to dance around that a little bit. I'm not saying you need to literally have children die on the battlefield, because that is very much a thing that can happen in FE4. They even have a death screen, which I discovered during my substitute run, to my horror. If you actually don't save the kids, they get murdered, which a modern remake may not be okay with that, so you might want to dance around that a little bit. I think you can sort of bypass a lot of those elements with creative writing. You can allude to these things happening, but you don't have to, say straight out that they are going on. You don't need to imply that there's actual real incest or child hunts going on, but the characters can kind of hint at it. And I think by doing that, you can still retain the dark feel of FE4 without, slapping an adult rating on the game, which I think is what they very much want to avoid. So up next, I want to talk about maybe one of the most controversial aspects of Fire Emblem 4, and those are the absolutely massive maps. A lot of people don't like these maps. Myself included sometimes. Yeah, I get it, it's tedious. Moving your entire army from point A to point B is boring, and it's not great game design. So how do we fix this? How do we fix the massive maps? Do we shrink them down? Do we cut them up into smaller segments? I mean, you could do that. Instead of seizing 3 castles on a single map, you could split it up into 3 and have 3 different chapters, and yeah, everyone would probably be a lot happier. However, I think that by doing that, you would make the game feel lesser, in a way. There are many cool examples of amazing storytelling that you can do with these big maps, and I think one that springs to mind is the end of Chapter 9 of the second generation, where you're in southern Thracia, and you've just finished pretty much conquering every single castle on the map, and you're moving towards the final one, you're preparing for the final battle. And out of nowhere, an enemy Wyvern general named Arion, he comes out of the castle with 4 different squads of Wyverns, and he decides to attack every single one of those castles simultaneously. And it is just such an epic battle, and it really, really gets your blood pumping. I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, oh my god, like I have to defend every single one of these castles at the same time. What an epic way to end the chapter. And if you break the maps up into smaller pieces like that, you're not going to get stuff like that anymore. And yeah, it's a big price to pay, I guess. You gotta have boring maps to get these epic storytelling devices, but I think it's worth it, honestly. And if you have ease of use or quality of life improvements like you had in Echoes, like for example with auto charge features where you pretty much just press charge forward with your entire army and you skip the player phase, you can move your army from point A to point B really quickly anyway. So I don't think having these big maps is going to be a problem. I'm not saying not to improve the map design. There are certain areas of the maps where I think you could maybe shrink them down a little bit, like long roads, and maybe like the dark forest in Chapter 2 where you meet Deidre for the first time. You could maybe like remove a couple of trees here and there so it's not as tedious to traverse. But overall, I think that the big, large maps is part of FE4's charm. And if you take them out or you cut them up into smaller segments, you're just gonna make the game feel less epic. And in this case, I actually am defending like 20-plus-year-old game design. I think you should try and keep it in as much as you can. Not saying there's no ways to improve it, but if you take it away completely, you take away an important part of FE4's soul. So up next, I want to talk about the castle mechanic. Now in Fire Emblem 4, you can go inside castles and you can do stuff in them. You can visit the pawn shop to buy gear, you can visit the blacksmith to repair items, and you can talk to a creepy old man to find out who you're in love with. And all this is really good, but there is one particular system of the castle mechanic that really needs an overhaul, and that is the arena. The arena of Fire Emblem 4 is probably one of the most exploitable mechanics in Fire Emblem history. It allows every single character to go in and fight against the gauntlet of opponents. It has no entry fee, you don't pay a single gold piece to fight in there, and even if you die there, there's no consequence. You just get tossed out at 1 HP and you can re-enter. You just need a little bit of healing and you're good to go again. And sometimes you can just re-enter at 1 HP until you win the fight due to sheer RNG, so it is not a great system. Not only does it make your strong characters even stronger, so it's kind of like a rich get richer thing where your strong characters who can clear the gauntlet just continues to improve, they get golden experience, whereas your weak characters who can't clear the gauntlet, they stay weak, so it just increases the gap of power between your characters, so that's not great. But in addition to that, in addition to its exploited mechanics, I just think it takes too long. Like, to arena with every single one of your characters, it eats up a lot of time, and that's just not good game design. In my Let's Play, I ended up having to cut most of it out because it took hours. Like, literally it took 1 to 2 hours to arena with every single one of your characters, and that's just not good. So the arena needs to be overhauled. The arena just needs to be redesigned completely. I'm okay with there being a gauntlet. I like how you change out your gear before a battle. It really adds a strategic element to the battle. But I think the arena needs to scale to a character's power level, similar to how it does in the later games. I think that it doesn't make sense that a weak character like Du, for example, goes in and fights the same opponents that a character like Sigurd, for example, does. I think there needs to be some sort of enemy scaling in the arena. And there just needs to be some sort of restriction. There needs to be a hard cap of how many players you can send into the arena so that you can focus on the characters who really need the experience and gold and not everyone else. Because honestly, arenaing with every single one of my playable characters, every single chapter, kind of makes me want to kill myself. I want the arena to still feel like FE4. I don't want it to just be traded out with a generic GBA arena. But the mechanic just needs a big overhaul because as it stands right now, you spend too much time in the castle. And that's a criticism I've levied against Tree Houses and its monastery feature. You just spend too much time in the monastery. And honestly, if they don't do anything to FE4's castle system and the arena mechanic, it's going to be the same thing there. You'll be spending 80% of your time inside the arena, and that is just not good gameplay. Now, personally, I wouldn't mind if they do a little bit of a monastery thing with the castles of FE4, where you actually get to run around inside them as Sigurd and talk to the players inside there. I don't mind that at all. Just don't make it into Treehouse's Monastery 2.0. Make it a small and cute feature of the game where you can run around a little bit and explore, but don't make it the dominant part of the game, because Treehouses just showed us that is not the way to go. So up next, I want to talk about the pairing mechanic. One of Fire Emblem 4's most iconic features is the ability for your playable characters to fall in love, get married, and have children. And those children will grow up and fight for you in the second generation. And out of all the games that features pairing mechanics, I think Fire Emblem 4 by far did it the best. I was never a big fan of the time travel shenanigans that Fates and Awakening did, with the children growing up faster and fighting alongside their parents. Not a big fan at all. And the fact that you could romance those children with your avatar, it's just not good. But I will say that while I think Fire Emblem 4 did pairings the best narrative-wise, mechanically, it was kind of convoluted. I mean, you had to have characters wait next to each other a bunch, a lot. And sometimes they would just get in love with each other without you really having much power over it. Like, for example, Lewin and Sylvia can fall in love without ever being next to each other because their love points just increase naturally. And this is really annoying if you want to plan pairings. I mean, I remember in my Let's Play of Fire Emblem 4, I had a lot of issues with some of the pairings because some of them were so slow and others were so fast, and I had to be really careful and not have characters stand next to each other. And this system just needs a massive overhaul, and I think one of the best ways to improve this would be to simply add regular supports into the game. Now imagine every time you visit one of the castles, you get a list of supports, and you get a list of characters who have unlocked supports, and you get C, B, A, and S supports, and how you do a pairing is to simply unlock all the support points. Then you have perfect control over which characters you want to fall in love. Of course, it's gonna take you a while to build up those supports, but it takes a while in original FE4 as well. But this time around, you'll have a nice progression. You enter the castle, you see that Lewin and Sylvia have unlocked their C support. You play it, they have a cute little conversation in which Sylvia says something like she likes it rough or something, and then you have the C support played. And then once you get the B support and the A support and eventually the S support, that's how you do the pairing. Gives the player a lot more control, prevents characters from accidentally falling in love with one another, and you get the ability to add a bunch of support conversations into the game, which would be really good for the story. I mean, FE4 has such wonderful characters, but some of them barely have lines in the game because the game doesn't feature traditional support conversations. So please just add the regular support back into the game, and that's pretty much how I would fix the pairing mechanic. I don't think you really need to do it better than that. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, just give us traditional supports. So we obviously can't talk about pairings without also mentioning the Holy Blood mechanic, one of Fire Emblem 4's staple features. Some characters are just naturally enriched with Crusader blood, and as a result they are much stronger than regular humans. The minor blood Crusaders are strong, but the major blood Crusaders are basically gods among men. I mean, equipped with their holy weapons, they can basically wipe out entire battlefields on their own. I mean, the first time Lewin gets his hand on the Thracia, he can just wipe out entire battalions on his own, and it is absolutely marvelous to behold. Now, it is probably very tempting in an eventual Fire Emblem 4 remake to reduce the strength of the Crusaders a little bit, to make the Holy Blood a little bit less significant, to make those holy weapons a little less powerful. And I can certainly see the argument balance-wise to make Thracia a little bit weaker, instead of 20 speed, maybe just grants plus 10. But this is another one of those mechanics where I think that staying faithful to the original is actually going to make the game feel more epic. Crusaders are the main focal point of FE4. I mean, the whole story revolves around how strong they are. To reduce their power level for the sake of balance, I think would be taking away an important aspect of Fire Emblem 4, and that is the fact that these Crusaders are literal gods among men. and the holy weapons are incredibly powerful and very important to the story. And if you reduce their power for the sake of making things feel more fair and balanced, I think you also reduce the epicness of the story in general, and that's not a good thing. I want the Thracia to be broken. I want Lewin to solo armies with the Thracia, because that is epic, and that is what we all remember when we play FE4. We remember those holy weapons because they do stand out so much. They make those Crusaders seem like the demigods that they actually are in the story. So, no, I would not want to nerf the Holy Blood mechanic. I would not want to nerf the holy weapons. I actually say keep them as strong as they were, because that is part of what makes Fire Emblem 4 feel epic. When you see that guy coming out of the battlefield, when you see that enemy character with the Holy Blood, and you see that holy weapon in his hands, you know that you are in for the fight of your life. And likewise, when one of your playable characters gets their hand on that holy weapon, and they glow up in that Crusader glow, you know that they're just gonna go out there and kick a whole lot of ass. And that is part of what makes Fire Emblem 4 so epic, and I would not change it at all. So up next, I want to talk about the trading mechanic, or rather the lack of a trading mechanic, because of course in Fire Emblem 4 you cannot freely change items between playable characters. The only way to get a weapon from one character to another is to go to the pawn shop and then sell your weapon and have that character buy it up, which of course loses you a bit of gold because you sell items at half price. And I will admit this is a very clunky way of doing trade, and the first time I played FE4 I just remember going like, what the hell is this? Why can't they just talk to each other? It's like, hey Ira, can I borrow that armor slayer? I gotta kill that general. It's like, no, you gotta go to the pawn shop first. It's like, I understand why a mechanic like this would really rub players the wrong way. If they remake Fire Emblem 4 and they do not include the trade mechanic, it's gonna piss a lot of people off. Let's be honest, people won't like it. Now, if you decide to add traditional trading to FE4, you also have to remove some other mechanics, like for example the kill count of the weapons. In Fire Emblem 4, weapons track their individual kill counts. If you get more than 50 kills on a single weapon, it becomes a killer weapon, and each kill above 50 will add another percentage of crit. As a result, you can get some ridiculously powerful weapons with tons of crit on them, like for example, a Brave Sword with 99 kills is as strong or potentially stronger than some of the holy weapons in the game. Like, it is absolutely insane how good a weapon like that is. If you get the ability to trade that Brave Sword around in between your characters, it is absolutely game breaking, and that cannot be a thing. So if you want traditional trading in Fire Emblem 4, you also have to remove some of the other features of the game, which I don't think that's a good trade-off. I personally like trading not being in Fire Emblem 4. I think it gives it a more iconic feel. It makes the choices feel more impactful. Which character gets which weapons matters a whole lot more. But I will admit, I'm not gonna cry if they put trading into FE4. I think it will potentially work out. There's another thing I want to talk about briefly as well, and that is the fact that each character has their own individual gold pool. I think these two mechanics will go hand in hand. If you have a lack of trading, like in the original FE4, then you can also keep the gold mechanic. However, if you add trading into the game, then you probably want to scrap the whole individual gold thing and just have everyone share a pool of gold. You can't have one without the other. So I think they kind of like, they come as a linked feature, basically. But on this one, I don't really have many strong opinions one way or the other. Personally, for my enjoyment, I would want trading to not be in FE4. But I think in order for the game to appeal to as many people as possible, I think adding in the trade mechanic would probably be a good move. And I can see that's being what they're doing as well, if they remake FE4. So up next, I want to talk about the Pursuit skill. And this one deserves a segment all on its own because it is an incredibly important feature of Fire Emblem 4. Without this skill, you do not double attack. It does not matter how fast you are, if you do not have the Pursuit skill, you will never double attack. The only other way to double attack is to have the Adept skill, but that is a chance-based proc, so that's random and not something you can rely on. Pursuit, in my opinion, is a badly designed skill. I do not think this should be tied to a skill at all. It makes or breaks certain characters. If a character doesn't have Pursuit, they are almost always universally bad. There are some characters who might be able to work without it, like for example Lewin, because he's just that good. But not having Pursuit just means a character for the most part will be complete garbage, and they'll need to rely on the Pursuit band being traded to them from Arden's secret event, and that is just not good game design at all. So personally, for me, the way you solve Pursuit is quite simple. You just remove it from the game. You allow every single character to double if they have 3 or 4 more points of speed compared to their opponent. If you want to keep Pursuit in, maybe make it do something else, like for example, allow you to double with just 1 point of speed more than your opponent, and other characters without Pursuit, they need 3 or 4. I think that would be a nice way to balance it, so you could For example, Myrmidons, they get Pursuit as a class skill, they double a lot more frequently if they just have a little bit more speed, whereas any other character, they need more speed. So you could definitely change it around like that, but I would just scrap the entire system that requires Pursuit for a character to double. It is bad game design. Thracia did this, and I think that speaks volume. Kaga realized that having a skill like Pursuit, which is so essential in the game to have characters double, it's just not good game design. Just get rid of it. And then I want to talk very briefly about the substitute characters of the second generation. Now, if you failed to do any pairings in the first generation, either because you're not very good at having characters stand next to each other, or maybe you lost some of them to permadeath, you will get some substitute characters taking the place of the Holy Blood kids in the second generation. And these substitutes are ridiculously weak. They are really bad. Some of them can work a little bit, but others are just downright unplayable. Mainly because some of them don't come with Pursuit, which I just talked about. That just makes them incredibly hard to use. Now, I think in a potential FE4 remake, I would amp up the strength of these substitutes just a little bit. I realize that, the whole shtick is that they're not supposed to be as good as their Holy Blood counterparts, and they shouldn't be. Like, they really shouldn't be. They are not Holy Blood kids, and so they should feel a lot more mortal. But I think the power level between the substitutes and the Holy Blood kids is astronomical. Like, it's absolutely insane. Like, watching them side by side, it's not even funny how much stronger the Holy Blood kids are. And so, having the power gap shortened a little bit, I think would be probably warranted. Again, I don't want them to be super strong, but it would be nice if they weren't as crap. Honestly, I think just removing Pursuit skill, as I talked about in the last segment, that would do a lot to just making the substitutes more viable, but I think some of them should also get their stats just buffed a tiny little bit. Now I would like to take a moment to talk a little bit about Thracia 776 and how it should be included into an eventual remake of Fire Emblem 4. And I think everyone sort of agrees that adding Thracia in the middle as sort of like Generation 1.5 would probably not be a good idea. It would kind of mess with the continuity, and I don't think it would be a very good idea, honestly. I think all the resources should probably be focused on the first and the second generation. I think if they add Generation 1.5, which is Thracia, they're going to spread themselves too thin like they did with Tree Houses, and it's going to make the whole game worse as a result, so let's just not do that. However, I am not completely opposed to adding a couple of elements from Thracia 776 into Fire Emblem 4. Like, for example, having Reinhardt do a cameo. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I wouldn't be opposed to a couple extra playable characters in the second generation, like, for example, Sias. I had this cool idea the other day that it would be cool if you get Sias in the second generation and then have him kill Arvis, then he could get the Volflame, and he could actually use that in the final Holy War. Stuff like that I think would probably be okay. I don't think you could add every single playable character from Thracia, because Fire Emblem 4 is a game where you can't really have too many playables for obvious reasons, because of how the game is laid out. So while I would be okay with them adding a couple of elements in from Thracia 776, I think they should be a bit careful not to add too much. Because again, Thracia 776 is a side story of Fire Emblem 4, that's how it's meant to be. If we start incorporating that into a Fire Emblem 4 remake, I don't think it's going to go over very well. I think I would rather just have Thracia 776 as a remake in the future as its own game. Because the mechanics of Thracia are so different compared to Fire Emblem 4, it just wouldn't work. But to have a couple of characters from Thracia 776 do a cameo in Fire Emblem 4 as a remake, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think that would be kind of cool, honestly. Even if they're just DLC characters, I'd be okay with it. And then I want to talk about a fun little mechanic that I thought about the other day before I made this video. And this may sound a little silly, but just bear with me here, okay? So in every single Fire Emblem game, if you want to play a harder difficulty, what you do is you go to the menu before you start a game, and then you select harder difficulty. And that's it. You get a slightly harder game that is harder to beat with increased stats, and that's about it. Maybe your players get a little bit less experience, but you're limited to a simple menu, and that is how you increase difficulty. Now what instead of that? Instead of a normal hard or maniac, you get a menu option called Path of the Crusader. When you click on this Path of the Crusader, the little Crusader reel that you get at the start of the game, a little circle with all the Holy Bloods and all the weapons inside, it lights up in front of you on the screen. And you get the option to click each of these individual Holy Bloods, and every time you click on them, they light up, like whoosh, with a cool sound effect. Now imagine you click on the Mjolnir Holy Blood, it lights up, and it says, the Mjolnir Holy Blood is now empowered. And every time you meet one of the Phrygias in the game, like Bloom, Ishtar, they get stronger, with better skills, higher stats. Maybe there's even more Thunder Mages in the game as a whole, and the ones that are already there are much stronger. And then, if you want to do a really hard playthrough of Fire Emblem 4, you click on every single one of those Crusaders, and they all light up. And every single time you fight anyone from that Holy Blood house or faction, they are much stronger. And if you do all of them, you get a final option called the Path of Loptir. You click on it in the middle, and it goes like, you know, I'm being very visual here, I know, but I'm sure my editor's gonna make it work. And then, when you click on the Path of Loptir, there's like dark mages everywhere, and Julius is like this insanely strong boss, even more powerful than he already is. And it becomes like an insane maniac playthrough of the game. It's a silly idea, but I just thought about it the other day, and I was like, that would be a cool idea to improve the difficulty, and it would allow you to gradually like change the gameplay. You know, you could do maybe just a couple Crusaders, you could do maybe Njoran and Mjolnir and just leave it at that, or maybe you could do 4 or 5 Crusaders, or maybe you could be a complete Madeline and do all of them, and I think it would just be cool. Just be cool. A little bit of a different way of adding up the difficulty that isn't just selecting harder difficulty on a menu, you know? So let me know what you think about it. Do you like the Path of the Crusader idea? Or do you hate it? I thought it was kind of cool, but then again, I made it, so. So to end this video, I want to wrap things up by talking about a couple of things I don't want in my Genealogy Remake. And I know I just mentioned it, but I think it bears repeating. I do not want Generation 1.5 in Thracia. I think it would spread resources too thinly. Please stick to the 2 generations. I would rather they get all the focus that they deserve, and not adding like a 3rd generation on top of that. It would just not be good. And I know I say this a lot, and I know I'm gonna say this in every single video I make in this style, but please do not add an avatar character. I know the temptation is going to be so high for a Genealogy Remake because of the children and the pairing mechanic. Oh my god, they're gonna be so tempted to add an avatar character to the story, because imagine you could like shag all your favorite people, you know, you can have kids with all your favorite people as the avatar. You know, it is the ultimate player fantasy, you know, all those Ira stands, all those Bridget stands, all those, oh god, they're gonna go nuts over being able to insert themselves into a genealogy story and actually have children with them that will be relevant in the 2nd generation. Please, 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 please do not add an avatar to Fire Emblem 4. You're going to ruin the story. You're going to take the focus away from Sigurd and all these other important characters, and you're going to give the spotlight to some stupid cardboard cutout that would just cheapen the entire experience. I know it sounds really... I'm being very dramatic now, I know, but I just know that when they get around to remaking Genealogy, if they ever do, they're going to be so tempted to put an avatar character into the game because of the children mechanic, and I'm going to hate it if they do. So here's to really, fingers crossed, hoping they don't go that path. There's a couple of other things I really don't want, and I've said this before, but don't add DLC that's worth more than the game itself, and I don't want to see a fishing minigame. I know the thought of Sigurd sitting on the pier fishing together with Deidre sounds really nice, but I don't want it. And finally, I don't want them to change major aspects of the story to cater to the players. I know they're going to be super tempted to make Ishtar recruitable. She's just such a popular character, everyone loves her, me included, but I don't want to see Ishtar recruited. I just don't. Part of her story is the tragedy. You know, that is part of her character, is the tragedy of Ishtar. I don't want to see her recruited. Please, not even as a hidden secret Easter egg recruitment. I don't mind you adding more scenes with Ishtar to show the fact that she's not evil. I wouldn't mind there being like a couple of cutscenes extra with Ishtar, or maybe an extra scene where you get to meet her and talk to her or something like that, but no recruitable Ishtar. I know it's very tempting, but don't do it. Alright, so those are the things I want from a Genealogy Remake. Do you agree with me, or do you disagree with me? If only there was a place where you could go and be vocal about such things. If only there was a place where you could go and let me know that I'm full of shit. Oh wait, yeah right, that down there, it's the comment section. That's where you do that, man. Aren't you glad I informed you about this? Imagine, you weren't aware of this until now. Did you know that there's like a little thumbs up button you can click on as well that turns blue? And then you can click on this little button that allows you to be notified whenever I upload more video. Why has no one told you this? I don't understand. But now you know. You can thank me later. After you click like, subscribe, and write a comment, that is. You're welcome. Guys, that's it. That's the video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.